Welcome, stranger. Been a while. In fact, a long while. I run a camera repair shop, and I got up to 3 months behind on my repair work, and I just had to stop making videos and start getting some repairs out. And I'm about caught up now, so I thought now I could make a video and not feel too guilty. Decided to make a video, a vlog video, which I enjoy making those, and was going through my storage room with all the hundreds of cameras in there and decided I'd make one on the Pentax SP500. I always liked that camera. I guess because it's way back there. Was in a transition point. What marks it makes it special is that it was one of the old cameras where when you meter it, you had to stop down the lens, take your meter reading, and then open the lens back up to focus, which was not a problem in bright sunlight, but could be a problem with overcast or inside. You definitely then had to do the two-step system. If it was outside in bright sunlight, you didn't have to do that. But on a lot of these old cameras, I was used to it because I was raised on cameras like that, where you had to stop them down, and that activated your meter, and once you got your exposure right, then you had to turn the meter off and open the lens back up to focus because you needed that light. And I need to move along here. Anyway, so I grabbed the camera, put it on my desk, took it apart, found that the meter wasn't working, and everything has been oiled and cleaned and adjustments made. It's ready to put back together and be used. So I decided now would be a good time to make a vlog video and kind of take all of you through the camera and show you what's inside. It's relatively a simple camera, which is another reason I like it, because at that time many of the cameras were simple. It was before they started stuffing them full of electronics. So I guess we need to get started. Okay, let's get started on the camera, this vlog, this voyage. I think I'll start right here maybe. Here's the top cover, which is what I usually start with. The rest of the camera, some parts are in these petri dishes, which I'm blocking my own camera here, and then having trouble here. The front plate, mirror cage, body, everything here, and I kind of move it out of the way, and usually I always start with the top cover, which is the logical place to start, and then move down through the camera, save the body for last. So here's our top cover, and ooh, stomach's growling. Okay, SP500, which basically this camera is the same as the 1000. They didn't add anything, they just took a few things away, like the self-timer, the hot shoe, and the 500. They lowered the speed from 1000 to 500 that you can select, but actually I did a little bit of reading, and supposedly you can still use 1000 if you go past 500, although I've never tried it myself. And up here the serial number. On the older cameras, when they started selling them in the States, they put really large serial numbers on them, painted large, very nicely made. Later, they started just stamping them in very lightly somewhere on the camera. Then after that, they even started just putting serial number stickers on them, the cameras, which I hated because they could just be peeled off, and they looked crummy. And what over here, we got nothing really but the plunger and a little window here. It goes from black to red. I forget which is when the camera's charged. If the camera if it's charged, if it's red, or if it's charged when it's black. And people these days that have digital cameras will say, well, who cares? What's that for? Well, if you were taking pictures of the family and you got them all lined up and it's like a holiday, which back then quite often that's what cameras were used for. It's family gatherings. Are there still any families out there? Who knows? And you know, he would say 1, 2, 3, cheese. They always use that word. And then if you didn't know the camera was charged, you'd press this release here. Nothing would happen. The camera wouldn't take the picture. Well, so what you do is you make sure the camera is charged by looking through this window here. It could be red or it could be black. I forget, like I said, which. The owner would know. I don't recall. It was just not something I needed to know. And or like if you're a sporting event and you're waiting for that moment when somebody catches the football, well, you want to make sure the camera's charged. You got say a 300 millimeter telephoto on your camera, and the ball, you know, say it's a winning catch, and you press this and then nothing happens, and you've missed your picture, and it's all because you didn't look through this window. You got to look through the window and make sure your camera's charged. Something you don't have to worry about with digital cameras. I don't hate digital cameras. In fact, I've been buying them since they've been for sale. But, of course, my love is old film cameras, not digital. Digitals are, they're kind of like a Xerox machine or a copy machine. They're useful, but they have no soul. Put it that way. The Pentax company always had Honeywell on the cameras in the early years. I don't know how many years, 4 or 5. And the reason was that Pentax wanted to sell the cameras in the States, but they had no distributor. Somebody has to take the cameras and advertise them and put them in a brick and mortar store somewhere and take care of all the little details. They got to hire employees and hire space to, you know, and they got to get them in the, I don't know what stores they had back then that would sold cameras, but a camera store anyway in each city. Representative would come around, a Honeywell representative, and try to sell the Pentax brand. I don't recall this happening with Canon or Minolta or some of the other companies, but maybe they just didn't put it on the top cover. But with Pentax, they put the Honeywell here on the front. I guess that H means Honeywell. I don't really know. Maybe it's an old logo. I wanted to mention this top cover has a scrape mark right here. Let's see if I can get a little closer there. There. A scrape mark right here. You can see it's kind of shiny. And then it has a dent right here. And some wear marks along the front here. And you'd say, well, why am I showing you this? I'm showing you this because I will probably sell this camera on my website. I've been fixing spare cameras around my shop. Say a customer sells me a camera. Let's say he sends me a camera and I tell him the price and he says, well, no, I don't want to spend that much. Just keep the camera. Or I would offer to buy it from the customer. And then I'd fix it up and then sell it on eBay. eBay over the years has just got to be a pain to work with. And they keep raising their rates to where if you sell something eBay, you only, I don't know what, I figured it out once. I think they take like a fourth, it seems like, on cameras. Like if I have a $300 camera, they'll send me $250. They keep $50, and that's too much for what they do. So I decided to start selling on YouTube, on my own site. I didn't even know I could. But then I started seeing YouTube channels selling mouse pads and clothing items and different things they had. And I looked up and on YouTube, yes, I can sell cameras. And I didn't know that. I should have done it a long time ago. And so I'll be opening up a small playlist. I don't know what I'll call it. Maybe I was thinking about calling it just Buy It Now from, copy that from YouTube. And there won't be many on there, but occasionally when I get a camera in and I refurb it top to bottom, I'll put it on my playlist. And if somebody wants it, like if somebody wants an old SP Pentax 500 that's been gone through top to bottom, it'll be for sale there. Anyway, let's move on. Okay, next, bottom cover. Probably heard some people out there groaning. Corey and his bottom covers. Every video, always the bottom cover. Yeah, well, we're going to do it again. Got to. There's always a beginner out there somewhere that doesn't know what I'm about to say. You know, because you've seen it on probably many videos, but most people haven't. The bottom cover is the history of the camera, because normally a camera, when it's sitting down, sits on the bottom cover. And so if it's been treated, if the former owner has treated it really rough, this will be quite often dented, gouged, in pretty bad shape. And you would say, well, okay, so what? So if you're at a camera show, or if you're buying one on eBay and they've got a picture of it, it's always good to look at the bottom cover to see how well the customer treated it. If the bottom cover's beat up, he probably treated the whole camera pretty bad, pretty rough, let's put it that way. Sometimes if they put them in a case, they'll look new. So you can't always be sure, but this one was not in a case. As you can see, the little scratches on it here and there. I would call this an average bottom cover. The owner did not mistreat the camera. Just normal wear and setting it down on tables and car seats and wherever. This little battery compartment here was a pain and a bad design by Pentax. I don't know at the time what type batteries. Well, this was right after photocells. Cameras started out having nothing, no photocells or batteries. And then they went to photocells in the 50s. And then in the 60s, they started putting batteries in the camera in a small circuit, as opposed to photocells. And I guess different companies tried different batteries, but Pentax unfortunately chose this battery here for this compartment we called it a 400 back in the day, 60s, but I don't know what they call it today. And when I say 400, it probably had a prefix, but if you're in a camera repair shop, you just somebody would say, what do you need? And say, I need a 400. And they match this little button battery here. Kind of a strange looking little battery. Slanted edges here, not straight edge. Not like a pill. I don't know what you call that. Probably they got it from a hearing aid or something, who knows. Anyway, the reason I dislike them so much is that if this battery burst, the acid would get on these threads and it would lock the cover in place. And they were nearly impossible to get out if that happened. And they've been sitting a while. And every time I get a Pentax, I dread taking the cover off and seeing what kind of condition it's in. Okay, let's turn that over. There we go. Inside looks good, no problems. Set that aside. Okay, what am I going to show you next? Right here. There's the little cap that goes on it. Again, what they did is this cutout here is for a coin like you have in your pocket. I don't know what maybe a nickel, But the thing is that after a while the edges would get rounded, and these were harder and harder to get out over the years as you were struggling with it to get it out. And pretty soon this notch, this coin notch, was nearly useless, and it made them really hard to get out. I see a couple of holes in there. I guess a needle nose pliers would get it out, which I've done, but that wasn't something really for the customer. It was probably more for the repairman. And I'm shaking all over the place. I always forget that I'm making a video for people to watch, and I can't. Let's see here. How about a different camera, maybe? If I do that and that, and put that right there like that. Let's see here. Anyway, where am I going with this? If you're at a camera show, check this cover, take it out, see if it's in good shape. Most of them are corroded. This one has a little bit of corrosion on the inside. I buffed it with a Dremel tool, wire tool, to get the worst of it off. Compared to the ones I normally get, this one's in good condition. I've seen them much worse than this over the years. It was, of all the cameras and the batteries and the battery covers, this is probably the worst. They later switched to a S76 battery, and the battery compartment was a lot better then. And the acid leaks were less, and I always, I forget which models it is that has the S76, but this 400 battery compartment, battery and battery cover were, I suppose when it was new, you only replaced them like once a year. But they were a very small battery, very weak battery. Probably, I think, a 1.35 volt battery, which after they got rid of the mercuries, why, it's hard to get. I keep some in stock that are alkaline, but they cost twice as much as an alkaline. Anyway, that's enough of that. Tend to add a little history here and there for people that are not repairing but just want to know about these small things. Once this knowledge is lost, it's gone forever, and you have to know what people were up against and what they were doing and what was going on back then. Like that little window for the whether the shutter was charged or not, and like these battery compartments, and how this one was unusual and not like wasn't standardized. Most cameras back then used S76 or 645 battery, but Pentax started out with this system, and it didn't go over very well, so they changed it after a few years. Okay, let's get started on front cover. I think I'll start with that next. This plate here covered the self-timer that would be here, except this model was the SP500. This was your economy model, so it had no self-timer. So, oops, sorry about that. And hit the camera. The SP1000 and SP had a self-timer here, but to keep the price down, they didn't put one in this model. Saved a little bit, I suppose. And then what else do we have here? We had this M42, I think is what it was called. So instead of having later years, or maybe earlier, the Canons, the Minoltas, and some of the other cameras went to a bayonet mount. But this Pentax, they stayed with this screw mount. And your lenses screwed in the front. Like if you're going to let's say a football game, maybe a father or son was in the team, take the family along on a Friday night, and to start the evening off, he would have a 50 millimeter on this camera here. And it would screw in, and it didn't have to be real tight, just, snug. And he would take pictures around the bleachers of the daughters and younger sons, wife, whatever. Maybe they would go get something to eat, drinks, bring it back into the bleachers. But when the game started, he would unscrew this 50 millimeter and take it off. And then he would take a 300 millimeter and screw it on. The whole process probably took a couple of minutes, but it wasn't really that big of a deal. But later, the other company started using bayonet mounts because it was a lot faster. And a bayonet mount normally only turns about a quarter of a turn. So on a bayonet mount, what you would do is to remove the 50 millimeter, you just press the button and twist. About a quarter of a turn, it would come out. And then to put in your 300, you would put it back in the same hole and then turn it back a quarter of a turn until you heard a snap. When it snapped, the 300 was mounted on the camera. So it was a lot faster. You could do it probably in 30 seconds. If you were a pro and you were making a living at it, you could do it in 15 seconds. And so this Pentax was an old system, and which was not bad. It never bothered me. I took a lot of pictures with screw mount lenses on the Pentaxes, so it's no big deal to me. At the time, you wanted, it was like today. They'll make it make it better, make it bigger, make it faster. And it's kind of like that, trying to improve the camera. But the Pentaxes are what you would buy if you couldn't afford a Canon or a Minolta. They were a very small camera, very light camera, and some of the features on it were kind of dated. But it was still a good camera. And so what do we have over here? Well, over here we have plugs. Here, one here. FP, what's that? Well, that's for bulb. Some of you won't even know what a bulb is. Talk about retro. You won't understand. And then X, that was for flash. Electronic flash. So they had both back then. Late 50s, early 60s. There were still a lot of photographers that used bulbs on their camera. The thing is you didn't use bulb that often. It was no good for distance. It was just used for close-up for people, like at home when they were taking pictures for Thanksgiving or Christmas or a birthday party. You needed flash because it was indoors and there wasn't enough light to take a picture. So they would pull out their a reflector that clipped to the top of the top cover. And then they would run a cord down here and plug it in right here. And that was for FP, that was for your bulb. And they would do the same for this electronic flash. They would plug the cord into here and it would go up to the electronic flash, which was also clipped to the top of the camera. And you might ask, well, why were there two plugs? Why not just use one? The reason being is because a bulb is, I guess you call it a chemical device. This is totally electronic, but this is partly chemical. An igniter would light the gauze into the bulb, which was, I think, in pure oxygen. And it took a while for all the gauze in the bulb to light up or get bright at the brightest point. And I don't remember what it was at the time. It's not important. Let's call it 5 milliseconds is what it took. So okay, get in trouble here. Let's say electronic flash. We'll start there. Make it more plain to people who've never had a bulb flash on their unit. An electronic flash is instantaneous. So if you set the camera for like a 30th of a second or a 60th, as soon as it reached 30th of a second or a 60th and the shutter opened and all the film was exposed, the flash would trigger and it would expose the entire film plane. And you've got your picture. But since the bulb was delayed, say 5 milliseconds, if you did this, what you did here, what would happen is the bulb would not be fully lit. It would just be igniting. And so the camera would take the picture and close the shutter, and you wouldn't get anything. Or maybe you'd get part of a frame. So what happened is when you put the camera on FP, the camera was delayed, and that the circuit that goes to here was delayed 5 milliseconds. So when the camera, you trip the shutter, the camera would open the shutter 5 milliseconds late and give the bulb time to reach full brightness before the picture was taken, or something like that. I know I'm probably not explaining it very well, but you get the idea. You had to slow down the shutter a few milliseconds so the flash bulb could reach peak luminance, where on down here you didn't. And that's the reason you've got two plugs. The camera, different circuits. This one's slightly delayed. Okay, let's see what we've got here. We've got I told you that. We've got our M42 screw mount. We've got our plugs we explained. Here is your meter switch. It's how you turn on the meter on the SP500. So, when I was talking about the intro, I was talking about it being a two-step process. And photographers could do it either way. I preferred my way that I probably explained in the intro. I don't remember now. I haven't looked at it. But it worked like this. When you turn on your meter, which you'd push up like this, if this front plate was on the camera, it would lock in that position. Your meter would stay on while you were adjusting. In other words, you were adjusting your speeds and you're adjusting your f-stops, getting your needle inside the prism viewfinder dead center, and it would stay there until you took the picture. Once you took the picture, it would disengage or turn off. The meter would turn off by going down. So, the problem, if you can understand what I'm talking about, is that when you do this like this and turn on your meter, you also stop down the lens. You have to stop down the lens because the metering in the prism has to know how much light is coming through the lens at the settings you're using to get an accurate read on to set the meter. It can't be wide open. So what would happen is that when you turn on your meter, the viewfinder gets so dim it's really hard to see through, especially if you're in overcast or if you're in a house. If you're out in bright sunlight, you could probably get away with it, but anywhere else, when you turn on the meter, the viewfinder gets so dim, so dark, you can't focus anymore. So the way I did it was like this. I would set up my picture, and I would turn on my meter, and then the viewfinder would go dark. I would set my exposure and get it the way I wanted it, and then I would reach up here on top and push it down. In other words, turn the meter off. The moment I turned the meter off, the lens aperture would open back up, and when it was open, that's I would focus and then snap my picture. And since the camera meter had already set, I'd already set the controls right, I would get a good exposure. But you could do it the opposite way, which if you had like it was bright sunlight outside, and what you could do is you could just push this up and lock it, and even though the viewfinder was kind of dim, if it was bright sunlight, it wouldn't be that dim. And you go ahead and focus your picture, and then when you snap the shutter, that'll fall back down again, which was a good system, a faster system, but not really usable in really dim light. So you had to choose. You had to choose whether to turn the meter on and get your meter setting, get your camera set up, and then turn it off and focus, or you had to go ahead and set your meter exposure and look through the viewfinder and focus with the dark viewfinder, dark screen, and then take your picture. When you did, of course, the camera turned the meter off. It is not that really complicated. It's easier to show somebody on the camera than it is explain it. Seems kind of strange, but like I said, the Pentax was kind of a step behind the other cameras. Now the other cameras like a Minolta or Canon, they had metering with the camera wide open, so that wasn't a problem. But it required more electronics. You had to put a resistor or a mechanical arrangement on the lens, so whatever you set the lens for, it would tell the meter. This camera here does not do that. The lens, the camera does not know what f-stop you have set for on your lens when you're taking a picture. So it's a two-step system where you have to stop down your lens and change your f-stops and get it balanced for the proper exposure. But when you do this, like I said, the viewfinder goes dark, so, or really dim, hard to see through, hard to focus. So it's better to turn the light meter off after you get the camera set, so you can see through the viewfinder to focus properly. And I hope that explains it. Okay, there's nothing much back here. Contacts here and here for the two different plugs that touch the body and go to the proper circuit. See that little studs going up and down? That engages the mirror cage and turns the meter on or off. That's about it. It's a simple thing, but there's a lot behind it if you're a camera repairman and understand these things and why they did it this way. Like I said, the more advanced cameras, Nikon, Canon, Minolta, they went very quickly to full wide open aperture metering, but Pentax was always behind a few years. But it helped them keep the price down quite a bit too, where we could afford them, because that was a time when not everybody could afford the best cameras. I don't know what would be comparable today, except maybe that I don't own one, but I've heard that the Apple iPhones are very expensive, $1,000 or more, and yet I don't know what I paid for my phone. It's a flip phone, and I think I paid like $100 for it. And it's kind of like this Pentax. It gets me along, and I use it for phone calls. I could even buy one that has a screen for a couple of $100. And it was the same way back then. If you wanted the best, you could afford it. You could buy it, but if you didn't, well, then you ended up buying Pentax. There were other cameras at that time also. I don't recall them all. Ryko, I think, had a brand that was pretty low. Shannon was another brand. And there were probably others that I don't remember, but anyway, you get the point. Okay, we've got a lot of more territory to cover, so let's go ahead and turn this off and move on. Okay, what are we up to now? A Petri dish. I store my parts in paint trays, ceramic paint trays, and I also store them in Petri dishes, very handy. I like to keep all my parts separate. I've seen some repairmen that just scatter them across their desk and seem to do fine, but I never did like that method. So let's move here. Let's switch cameras. See if I can not shake too much. This is the circuit board in the Pentax SP500 and the 1000. Nothing much really more than a fiber board with copper on top of it. Small resistor there. And that's all the Pentax had. It was, like I said, a very basic camera, which is one reason I liked it so much. This board comes back. I lost a screw there, or knocked one off. Put that over here, I guess. Sorry. Looking at the monitor, trying to figure out what I'm doing with my hands. This is, okay, I need to turn this way. A little bit more. There we go. This is 2 photocells that go to that board, fiber board, circuit board. As you can see, in fact, you can even see the little squiggly lines inside that measure the light. These are located on the back of the prism. And as the light comes through the lens and is reflected by the mirror up to the prism, the light is focused back into your eye so you can see what's going on through a screen, of course. But it's also putting light on these photocells. So as you change your, say, your lens aperture, you're changing the amount of light that'll fall on these photocells, and it's changing your exposure, and that's how you how this simple system works on this camera. Couldn't get anything much simpler than that. Those photocells, by the way, are quite often what go wrong with these cameras. I'll have people bring me their Pentexes and say that, well, I have to turn the aperture all the way open for some reason for all my pictures. Or I have to set the exposure down to 1/15 of a second to get a picture. And it's these photocells. They slowly die, sometimes suddenly, but sometimes they just get weaker over the years, and they have to be replaced. I don't know. There's probably some replacements out there at a electronic parts company, but what I did is when I buy cameras, I'll buy 6 at once, and I take the photocells out and I check them, and I keep the good ones, and the good ones go into the Pentexes when they come into my shop. That's I don't like using parts that weren't made by Pentax for their cameras, so I don't like swapping out photocells with something from an electronics dealer. Well, you really wouldn't know, but they got a big, thick catalog, and everything electronic will be listed in there, and it'll have serial numbers, and whatever type of photocell you've got in your camera, they can match it. That's another way of doing it, but like I said, I like to keep the cameras factory if I can. I don't like putting stuff into it that wasn't there originally. Okay, we've got our fiber board, our circuit board. This little, sorry about all this shaking. It's when you're close up like that, everything really should be pressed against something. Okay, this metal bracket you see here is what holds your eyepiece in, which is real simple. You just drop your eyepiece in there, and you put a screw in there, and it presses against your eyepiece and keeps it in place. Very simple camera. That's what I like about it. It's the reason I chose it to do a refurb on. The cameras later were too electronic for my taste. The making them that complicated did not give you better pictures. The pictures made by the lens, the exposure is it needs to be close, but it doesn't need to be dead on, because for one thing, you can't get the proper exposure because you're either exposing for highlights or shadows, especially if you're shooting prints, and you can't expose for both. So It's kind of a fallacy to think that you've got a camera with a real expensive meter in it and that it's going to give you the perfect exposure, because it might be metering for highlights, or it might be metering for shadows, and you don't know. Those are set at the factory. You can change it, of course. There's always an override, but the idea of spending so much money on a meter on a camera is fallacy. Here's that eyepiece I was telling you about. These eyepieces just are placed in the camera, and that bracket holds it in place. Sometimes you'll see a yellow in the corners, any of them through the four, and it's because this eyepiece is made of two pieces of glass and is glued together with an adhesive of some type, and over the years this adhesive gives away, the two pieces of glass start separating, and all of a sudden you see yellow in one of the corners. What else do we have here? Just see. I think we can maybe slip over here. Here's your meter, which is very simple. As you can see, it's only got two wires going to it, a red and a black. And then you got your needle, which, you got a target. Oops, it's magnetic, and my pliers are grabbing it. And that needle there, let's see if I can move that. Oops, got to be careful. Don't want to bend that needle. I've done that in the past. I have gotten a little too rough and bent those needles. Sometimes you can bend them back if you don't bend them too much. Okay, let's see if I can get down here, and no, the Sony wants to focus on my hand. I curse at the Sony, but I think it's probably got the best focusing system of all the cameras I've worked on or used. You see it there, the spring is spring-loaded, and when it's sitting in the camera and the meter's off, it goes to this weird position of halfway down. It should be straight out. On the later models they did that, but on the early ones it just was down here about halfway and then down some. And there's a spring inside here that it's tied to. If that spring inside here can come on, it's soldered, and sometimes you can drop a camera, the solder breaks, and then the needle, when you move it, it will stay wherever you put it. In other words, if I move it up here, it will just stay there. It won't spring back. If I move it down, it'll stay there. It won't move back. But as long as it's moving like this, your meter's probably okay. The spring is connected to it. The red and black wire, whatever voltage is applied to them, moves this needle. The needle needs to be the center of your target in your viewfinder, and it gives you correct exposure, or close. Your processor can adjust the exposure. If it's off a little bit, half a stop is nothing. It can fix that easy. If you start getting up to one stop off or two stops, then then the picture doesn't have a full range anymore. The pictures can become highly contrast if you're shoving all the values over to one side. I've worked at two different plants. They weren't really plants, private dealers that processed pictures. Even on one of them I was hand printing black and white for customers, and on another one I was hand printing color pictures. So I know a little bit about processing pictures. I'm talking about getting it larger and getting your paper out and running test exposures and zeroing it in, finally getting the right exposure, and then exposing the paper and then running through the chemicals. On an automatic machine, which is what most people, when they send it off to the company, are getting, is just, I won't call it a computer, but in the sense that we have today, but a densitometer or whatever they had would measure the emulsion and the film and the colors and choose an exposure and give you that. And that's what you got. It might be right and it might not be right. Like I said, if you're shooting in shadows and you're wanting, and the person you're shooting their faces in the sun, then you're really in trouble. It's just a matter of luck as to if you get it right or not. I need to move on here. Nothing over there but screws. Here's your speed control. It goes up to 500. The little trick that Pentax played, which is kind of funny, and I've only read this, I've never checked it myself, is that this little plate here, which costs not even a penny, they have one for the SP1000 and they had one for the SP500. And to sell the better cameras, they said that, the SP500 only goes to 500. Well, it would if you set it for 500. You'd get 500. You'd also get 1,000 if you put the SP on 1,000. But on this camera, what you had to do is you had to go past 500, and so you were about here. And then you would still get 1,000th of a second on the exposure. But it's just that you couldn't see the 1,000 here, which is that's strange. In other words, they didn't want to make two different designs or two different cameras. That'd be too expensive. So you remove the self-timer, remove the flash shoe clip, and put this little plate on here and tell, well, this camera only goes to 500. And if you want 1,000, you really need to buy the other camera, which costs more, of course. That's funny. That was back in, this camera was sold in 71. I started repairing cameras in 78. On my trays, I get, I forget even what it's called, but I label them. Top cover screws, meter screws, bottom screws, door screws, speed control, ASA, I, the front. The front would be the front cover that we were talking about earlier. Okay, move that out of the way. I think that's about it. Maybe a little more detour here. The prism that goes in the top. I was showing you those photocells. One goes here, one goes against here. The part that you're looking through is here. The eyepiece is facing it. And then the photocells here and here are measuring the light. Just like your own eye is measuring the light that's coming through the photocells, the photocells are getting hit with the same light. So it was a good system. It wasn't separate. A lot of cameras back then, earlier 50s, the photocells were totally removed from anywhere near the eye. They were just on the front of the camera. Like on a rangefinder. Or on a rangefinder, they put them on the front of the camera, near the lens. But on the Pentax and the SLRs, the photocells usually were in the prism. And the prism had foam wrapped around it to keep out dust. And I've removed it, but that foam would go bad and it would attack the mirror coating. And you couldn't pull the foam off or it would remove what mirror coating was there. So you had to get just some lighter fluid or alcohol and gently rub across it with a Q-tip. Just, a little bit at a time, and get all the gungy foam, the crummy foam off there. And normally when I put a camera back together, I don't put foam on here because I don't want it attacking the prism, because there are no more other than getting other cameras, and theirs are probably no better either. And then I get some flat black paint, which was made for photography, and I cover up where the foam was, so in case I did flake off a little bit of mirror coating somewhere, it won't let any light in. Prisms are a big headache because that mirror coating can become damaged very easily with things like tape or foam over the years. Okay, I've talked long enough. Let's stop here and move on.